If you thought that Andrea Berta's presence only existed during the summer, well, you're very, very wrong. This is today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is indeed the Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time, sort of 8:05. You know, it's nearly 8 a.m. every day. Just a little bit late this morning. So good morning to you all. Thank you so much as always for tuning in and joining me. Really appreciate your time. Hope you've had a really, really good week, and I hope that your Wednesday is strong as well. You've made it through Tuesday. I mean, what more can you really ask? Last night I experienced, I have to say, it was a wonderful time with some good friends and former colleagues and current colleagues as well. But I have to say, watching non-league football on a Tuesday night down in Hassocks, it was an experience. And I think for some of us who moan about long throws and set pieces and things like that, well, football can be worse than that. And it certainly was. It was one of those games where you just look and think, wow, like I don't think I'm particularly great at football. And I know that these guys are better than me by a long, long way. And it's still like when you get onto that pitch and it's 11 against 11, it's still just hoof the ball up the pitch and hope to get the ball back and maybe a score. There was a couple of really good goals, to be fair, but all came about because of kind of just like hoofing the ball from one end to the pitch to the other. But it was an entertaining evening and certainly worth the trip down, and it was a nice time. But back to the kind of upper echelons of the sport, and we return, of course, to discussing Arsenal and the news surrounding the club, because there is two big stories today. One, of course, is quite significant. The other is definitely significant, but it's not going to take up as much as our time as I think the other story is. So good morning, first of all, to those joining us live in the chat box. Good morning to Black Shine, to Shari, to Rich, to Trina, to Natty Tom, to Runs with Cows. We've got Matt G, and Jamil, Brian, and Mohammed and Steve. Good morning to you, to Sid, to Christopher, to T, to Franklin, to John LaRoche. We've got John in the chat, Easton Hunter. We've got Glenn. We've got Amber Lee. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Carrie Ann, I see. George, I see. Don, I see. Melissa, I see. Good morning to you all. Thank you for everybody tuning in and listening. Greatly appreciate you being here. So, yes, let's jump, shall we, into today's slides. And we kick off with the news from yesterday that Arsenal's game against Everton has been officially moved. It was a bit of a manic kind of lunchtime, if you like, because... well, in the morning, we kind of got these tip-offs, if you like, that the Everton Arsenal situation was kind of moving in a certain direction. Requests were being made, and Sammy Mokbel broke the news that the request had been made. I mean, Sammy Mokbel's had an incredible 24 hours of journalistic scoop, certainly, and is earning his money at the BBC, that's for sure, with some fantastic journalism. But the news broke that Arsenal had indeed officially requested to move the game to the Saturday at 8 p.m, December 20th, from that Sunday 21st game. Reason being, of course, is Arsenal play Crystal Palace on the 23rd in the League Cup quarter-final, and to have just 1 day's rest didn't make any sense. And so we kind of discussed, didn't we, on the channel, that it just was utterly ridiculous to expect Arsenal to play their game on the Sunday and then play again on the Tuesday. And so moving the game back was really the only option that made any sense at all for player welfare, of course. And that's, I think, what's key. I had trains booked up to Everton on that day. They're going to have to be rebooked, and I'm going to have to book a hotel, of course, as well, through work. But obviously, for fans that were travelling up that are going to be out of pocket for this, obviously it's going to be a frustration for them. And I've seen a lot of pushback online already about this game being moved and frustrations about this game being moved. Now, Arsenal, as confirmed by the statement on their website, are offering transport for the game. There are return coaches being put on for travelling fans at £10 a ticket for the return, which, is very well priced. I think, return to Liverpool for a tenner, very good indeed. But there's been no kind of indication about refunds or covering the costs that have been lost by fans booking non-refundable travel on the day or the day after, or maybe even the hotels and stuff like that. It is worth pointing out that all fixtures are subject to change, and that they are never, 100% kind of confirmed, especially more than a month out from that fixture. It's worth pointing out. So travel is always booked with an element of risk that the game, especially during the festive period, could be rescheduled. That said, obviously, when the fixtures get kind of confirmed through broadcast slots, you do tend to feel as though that is pretty much set in stone. But in this case, and in all cases, to be fair, it isn't set in stone ever. But there is obviously always the potential for those games to move, and this game has now been moved. The same can be said for Crystal Palace's game against Leeds. That game has also been moved to the Saturday as well. So both Arsenal and Palace will play their Sunday fixtures instead now on Saturday, meaning both teams will have the game, a 2-day break, and then the quarterfinal. The difference between the sides is that Arsenal have a week off before this game against Everton from their previous weekend game, but Palace play on Thursday night in the UEFA Conference League. They were rejected in their request to move that game back to the Wednesday. That request was denied. So for Palace, it is still, I think, 3 games in the space of, it will be 7, no, even less than that, 6 days: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 6 days. Yeah, 3 games in 6 days. Still going to be a lot for Crystal Palace, but it's going to be a frustration, I think, for them more so than it is for Arsenal. Mikel Arteta has kind of got his wish. He was very optimistic. He said super optimistic is what he said in the press conference before the Sunderland game about this fixture being moved, and he has been proven to be very much right in that optimism. But we'll probably discuss this more maybe in part 2. I've got some thoughts about kind of whether or not Arteta can be kind of accused of any level of hypocrisy. I might even be discussing it in a piece later on today with some of the comments that were made, but overall, I think the right decision has been made to move the game back to Saturday, despite, of course, the frustrating cost to that of the supporters that would be in attendance. But let's move on to the big story of yesterday, because last night, while I was at that non-league game, my phone started buzzing away because Sami Mokbel had broke yet another exclusive, which was that Arsenal were in advanced talks over appointing Napoli Head of Scouting Maurizio Micheli into a leading recruitment role. Micheli is credited with unearthing the likes of Marek Hamšík, Kim Min-jae, and Kavica Kvaratskhelia. And it was later, not soon long after, followed up by James McNicholas at The Athletic as well, who reported that Arsenal are close now to appointing leading Italian scout Maurizio Micheli to a senior recruitment role, the head of scouting department at Napoli. He is seen as one of the architects behind much of the club's recent success. That piece on The Athletic you can read with insights, of course, from Italian expert James Horncastle as well. So plenty of interesting kind of threads here, because Micheli has been, as mentioned there, kind of credited with unearthing some real jewels in Italian football over the last few years, particularly the likes of Kvaratskhelia and Kim Min-jae at Napoli. Now, Marek Hamšík, of course, was signed more so in a previous role before, even though Marek Hamšík, of course, did eventually end up at Napoli. What we did see was him sign, first of all, with Brescia, and that's where Micheli was working at the time when he kind of discovered the Slovakian international, who, from a personal point of view, Marek Hamšík went down for me as one of my favourite players to not play for Arsenal. I know we kind of did that discussion yesterday, and I can't believe I actually forgot Marek Hamšík, because I tell the story always that one of my first ever games at Arsenal was at the Emirates Cup, where Arsenal played Napoli, a Napoli side that included a rather controversial centre forward in Gonzalo Higuain. You might remember that summer where Arsenal very much chased the signing of Gonzalo Higuain, only then to not sign Higuain and then later add Mesut Ozil to their ranks. But Marek Hamšík was in the starting 11 that day, and even though it was just a friendly game, at that point, I think I was, I must have been 17, 16, 17 years old, going to that game. And it was one of my first games watching us. My first game was like the season just prior to that. But in the following summer, watching Marek Hamšík, I just kind of felt like this is probably the best footballer I've ever watched play in the flesh at that point. I'd only been to a handful of games at that kind of level in my life at that point, because I didn't really go to kind of high level games until I was older, until I could afford to go myself, because we weren't able to go when I was younger. And Marek Hamšík was without a doubt the best player at that time I'd ever seen play with my own eyes. It was an incredible experience to watch the dribbling, the power, the drive, the skill that he had. And Maurizio Micheli is credited with having found Marek Hamšík and brought him into Italian football from Slovan Bratislava, where he previously had kind of come through the ranks there and then signed for Brescia, before then signing for Napoli after a few years. Before then, Micheli kind of followed him to Napoli. And then Micheli, of course, has been with the Italian side throughout that. Well, actually, kind of had two spells at the Italian side, and as a result, of course, Arsenal now are getting one of the most experienced individuals who's done plenty of work with other Serie A sides, Verona and Bologna, as well. He's credited with time, as well as previously before his time with Brescia, also at Udinese as well, where he got some experience as a younger influencer in the game as well. But yes, he will join Arsenal. It is expected that he's going to join Arsenal at this point. Now, you might remember that this is not the first individual that Arsenal, particularly from Italian football even this year, that Arsenal were potentially looking to add to their ranks, because it also follows on from Tognozzi. You might remember these stories back in May, June time, that Matteo Tognozzi, the former Juventus sporting director, I believe, was also being linked, or at least head of scouting, was being linked with a move to Arsenal. It was kind of head of scouting, I think he was at Juve, and left in 2023 before moving to Granada, and has now taken up a role as of September of this year as a sporting director at Rio Ave in Portugal. So Arsenal decided against this. There were talks held earlier in the year between Arsenal and Matteo Tognozzi, but it was in the end Arsenal's decision not to move for Tognozzi. James Ellis was promoted into a technical director position. And of course, then Jason Ato left just slightly prior to that, of course, just after the January transfer window. And of course, Andrea Berta was appointed in that March time, I think, as well. So in the wake of Ato's exit, and then of course in the summer, we saw Tim Lewis leave the club as well. And a new board restructure went down, and several new individuals were introduced to the Arsenal board. Well, Andrea Berta now is adding, of course, to that kind of group of his team and recruiters and his scouting network and all that kind of element of the club. And Micheli seems to be joining Arsenal in a very senior scouting recruitment level role. And I think it's a move which I think will excite fans, to be honest, and should excite fans, and should certainly raise eyebrows of Arsenal's rivals to a degree as well, because of just how highly regarded Maurizio Micheli is. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what impact this has and seeing how this changes Arsenal's recruitment in the future. Because I think what's interesting about this, and why Arsenal are perhaps looking more so at somebody who can kind of find those gems, those young stars from, places and clubs where you wouldn't necessarily be, obviously, as just a fan or even just journalists, looking at kind of those teams. Even the hipster supporters amongst us that know a little bit about kind of the lesser leagues and some of the up and coming talents in the world of football. These are the individuals that manage to find the Kvaratskhelias, the Kim Min-jaes, the Marek Hamšíks playing for other sides elsewhere in the world, and bring them to the elite level where they then flourish. And the reason why that this is important at this specific moment is because of what Arsenal's squad looks like right now. Now, Arsenal's squad, the senior squad, looks very settled. We're signing the likes of William Saliba, Gabriel, hopefully soon Saka, hopefully soon Timber, hopefully soon Rice, to brand new contracts. We have other younger players in their early to mid-20s and some in their mid to late 20s already established on significant deals and lengthy deals, and they're locked in to Arsenal. This squad that is competing for the title this season is in a very strong position, and is locked in for quite some time. When you look at January, if everybody is fit, which Arsenal haven't had the benefit of this season, there is hope that the cavalry is coming and that Arsenal's players will be recovering from injury and they will have Odegaard and Havertz and Jesus and Gyökeres and Martinelli, Madueke back from their injuries after the international break at different stages. It won't be immediately, but they'll be back soon. And if everybody is back, then there isn't a need to sign anybody in January. And then you're looking at the summer window and you're looking at kind of the left-hand side and seeing Leandro Trossard's age and maybe Martinelli's future dominating that summer for a left winger. It might be that if Arsenal sell a surprise player that we weren't expecting to see go, then we might replace them with somebody else. But Arsenal's squad is pretty full. You only have 25 players that you can have in your squad. And you've also got to think about the fact that Ethan Nwaneri, Miles Lewis-Skelly, Max Dowman coming through, still integrating themselves as part of the squad as well. Maybe some players leave on loan. Maybe Nwaneri gets a loan somebody somewhere, or maybe they want to seek more senior football on a regular basis, and Arsenal can't guarantee that. So they have to replace those kind of presences in the squad. Well, with a squad in this state, Arsenal is kind of primed, if you like, to now be in a position where, if you look at the Manchester Cities of this world, as they have been over the last however many years, and they've gone and signed I know with a multi-club model, it's easier to do, but they've gone and signed players like Savinho, for example, from the Brazilian league, and he's gone on loan to PSV and Girona as well, and has now, of course, returned and is playing very, very well indeed. And I know they signed him with Troyes because it's part of the multi-club model, but that type of move, I mean, Sverre Nipan, of course, as well, another young player that was linked to Arsenal, Norwegian international, has also now joined Manchester City. But it's not just these players, these are the types of deals that teams do when they have established themselves at the very top. And Arsenal haven't done enough, in my opinion, in signing young players and then sending them out on loan. Think about the last time that Arsenal signed kind of a young player who had a future, a real potential in the first team, and immediately went out on loan. Like, I'm not even talking about like Marquinhos. Like, Marquinhos was signed, integrated into senior squad, and when it was kind of learned that he wasn't really of the level necessary, he went on loans, which basically weren't with a view of him reintegrating into the Arsenal squad. They were with a view of him being sold, maybe for a profit if Arsenal were lucky. Arsenal haven't really done those types of Savinho deals, if you like, for a long time. Saliba, as Amber Lee points out, is probably the best example of the last time Arsenal did a deal like that. Signed a young player, 18 years of age, loaned them out with a view of them eventually integrating into the team. And that's the kind of deals that I see Maurizio Micheli does. Andrea Berta is going to be all over the senior squad. He's going to be the guy that's bringing in your Ezes and your Hincapiés and your Gyökeres, all of this. When Arsenal go and sign the senior guys that are going to come and integrate into the squad immediately, that's going to be Andrea Berta's field of play. And while Micheli might indeed have influence, certainly, and have advice and consultations with that process, from what we look at with Maurizio Micheli and what he's done with Napoli and finding kind of young talent that's come through the ranks and maybe has gone out on loan and then returned at Napoli, but players like Kvaratskhelia, players like Kim Min-jae that have kind of come out of nowhere, they've sometimes been immediately integrated if Napoli can afford to do that. Or other times players have left and gone on loan to other places and got opportunities elsewhere before indeed they've then reintegrated themselves in the in the Napoli setup. So that, I think, is a very, very interesting kind of element to this, that I think we might start seeing Arsenal sign some young stars that go on loan and then come back and then play. Or players, of course, we think of Kenan Yildiz has been linked to Arsenal quite a lot, for instance, Juventus, Serie A talent. There'll be plenty. I mean, if you think that Kenan Yildiz wasn't already on Andrea Berta's radar before Micheli arrived, obviously that's not true. He's been on Arsenal's radar for quite some time. But an individual like Micheli is going to help significantly. I know I keep changing the pronunciation. I'm not sure if it's Micheli or Micheli. I would assume maybe Micheli. It sounds more, I think it's probably the pronunciation, but I know how you all get very antsy about pronunciation, so I'm doing my best today. But it's an exciting proposition. It's an exciting thing that Arsenal are kind of waiting to witness now. And And I look forward to speaking to some more people in the coming days that know plenty more about Micheli than certainly I do and have done. I'm more clued up now than I was 24 hours ago, but certainly I intend to get even more in tune with what's going on. You need to stay in tune, though, with your safety and security online. And there is only one way of doing that when, there are plenty of ways, but there's only really one way, one true way, the best way. And that is, of course, by going through with NordVPN. And if you go to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan with 4 months extra thrown in free on top of that, as well as a 30-day money-back guarantee. If indeed you're not happy with the service for whatever reason, I can't understand why you would think that or want that or be in a position where you would want to give up such a brilliant tool. But that is there to give you that little bit of peace of mind that if you're not happy with the service and you just want to trial it and see what it's like and then go away from it, it's there. But I didn't. I've wanted to keep Nord by my side all the time. My safety and security when surfing the net on a public Wi-Fi service, or perhaps when I go abroad, I don't want to jump digitally back to the UK on my laptop or my mobile or my tablet. It can give me those abilities. So you shouldn't miss out on it either. NordVPN.com/Gooner, link in the description as always. Thank you to Nord for supporting the channel as per. Right, let's go to part 2, your questions and more, right after this. Right, this is part 2 of today's show where we're jumping into the chat box and tackling some of your questions. So let's do just that, shall we, as well? Because I'm sure there's a lot of you who've got quite a few thoughts on this news. Both, of course, not just on this news, but of course the Everton game being moved. That was the other key topic of today as well. So plenty still to be discussed and plenty of your thoughts, I think, to be had in this. Paul says, are we going down the multi-club model route to facilitate buying younger talent? Now, as far as I'm aware, I've not heard anything suggest that this is imminent, but we have asked Arteta in the past about this, and he has felt to be, at least on the outside, pretty open to the idea of that being something that the club could be or should be engaging in, exploring, because it's something that obviously the big clubs in the world of football are utilising greatly, and Arsenal probably don't want to look to be left behind. So yeah, I would say certainly it's something they need to look to try and look to as well. Pablo says maybe we don't, if we get them early and develop them and then kind of develop them into the players that they play in the Arsenal way from an early age as well. I mean, Arsenal do tend to kind of, if they sign young players, they kind of join the younger group, go through those youth ranks before integrating. It's more of a controlled way of doing it. If you loan players out, there's less control over their development, how they associate with kind of the Arsenal philosophy. And that's why maybe Arsenal prefer to keep things more in-house, because they can cultivate that understanding of the philosophy and how Arsenal play. And, it's always mapped from senior level to under 21s to under 18s to under 16s, so on and so forth. So I get that, but I do think there is something that Arsenal need to be better at, and it's probably loaning and improving and selling, as well, players as well. Sammy says, Tom, if I skip over the ad read, do I still get paid? I don't know. I don't know, Sam. I have no idea. Mark says, Tom, why do the Bundesliga attackers get more hype and attention compared to other leagues like in Italy as well? Other leagues like in Italy? I don't know. The Bundesliga in general is, in the last few years, obviously with Bayern, and then more recently by Leverkusen, Borussia Dortmund. I guess those are kind of, it's known more from its attacking style. Italy's kind of got something of a reputation for its defensive solidity, but that isn't necessarily the case today. It was more the case of, in the noughties, the 90s, definitely. And we thought of the Italian league and the Italian national side as being kind of this absolute impenetrable fortress of a nation in terms of their footballing talent. But that has changed. The Milans and the Juves and the Napolis and the Inters, less so Inter. Inter are definitely known for still having kind of defensive brilliance. But those other Italian sides are often scored upon quite simply. So I think maybe that's potentially a reason, whereas the German sides are more known for their attacking flair and attacking style. So I think that's probably worth adding. Kirill says in the Serie A in the last 10 years, a lot more goals get scored compared to, say, La Liga. Absolutely. Finley says, just because it's all over socials right now, Van Dijk debate for me, just Arsenal, Adams, Campbell, Gabriel, Saliba, all are better than Van Dijk. For me, he's nowhere near the Prem's best. Good, yes, but not better than them. Oh, debate. I mean, Van Dijk will go down as one of the greatest defenders in Premier League history. There's no debate about that for me. Is he better than Sol Campbell? I think so. Is he better than Gabriel and Saliba? At the moment, I think Gabriel and Saliba have got to go and prove themselves, winning big trophies as well, winning big titles, and they'll get there. Adams did that. So Adams for me is for me a bigger, better serial legend than Van Dijk. But I think Van Dijk has that over Campbell for me. I don't think that's too controversial. I can take my Arsenal hat off for a second. And Van Dijk, for me, while he's slowed down in the last year or two, there's no doubt about his quality. I don't tend to let kind of rivalries cloud my judgment on that regard. John says, hey, Tom, we'll soon have 3 strikers available. Would you play 2 together to cut out the 2-on-1s that we see when we have just 1 centre forward up front to try and break down the low blocks? Not from the start, but certainly I think during games we can adapt and change the lineup and the setup so that we will have 2 centre forwards on the pitch at the same time. US Arsenal fans, is in the past 5 years or so, KSE has won the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup, the NBA Championship. I have a feeling that Josh is going to try his best to make sure Arsenal are next. Well, we can hope and keep fingers crossed that is indeed the case. Pablo says, good scouting team will find these young talents from young sides to save the club money later and potentially make a lot of money for the club if they also get sold. And that is the element of Arsenal that has been quite poor. That has been quite poor. I mean, if you look at Napoli, for instance, right? Napoli last year made 100 million, over 100 million euros, around 100 million pounds selling players. Raspadori went to Atletico. Osimhen was sold for a big fee as well. Even they got some decent fees with some other younger players. The season before that, 80 million euros made with Kvaratskhelia, of course, being kind of that key one. 70 million euros to PSG, earned a lot of money off that deal. Season before that, Kim Min-jae, they made a lot of money off of that sale. Elgif Elmaz, of course, as well, going to Leipzig during that season. Kalidou Koulibaly going to Chelsea. Fabian Ruiz going to PSG. These are players that have made the club very decent money in those previous seasons. Then they had kind of a few years where it wasn't the case as much, but then the season before that, Jorginho being sold to Chelsea for big, big money in 2018. And then also players like Marek Hamšík, of course, despite being older, was sold at the right time to China, where they made a lot of money. Duvan Zapata was sold to Sampdoria, and they got decent money, of course, for him. And then the biggest one, Gonzalo Higuain. Despite paying big money to Real Madrid to sign Gonzalo Higuain, they still managed to sell Higuain for a huge fee to Juventus as well. So they've always sold well. They've always brought in young talent. They've always got kind of these intriguing younger players as well. Some of you might even remember a certain Edinson Cavani, who they signed from Palermo, and then think about what he did at Napoli as well before going to PSG. So, yeah, look, there's loads of examples of Napoli selling well and bringing in players, and especially kind of lesser-known players at the time, and then seeing what they could do with them. So, yeah, certainly. Fuad says, could you ever see KSE invent a multi-club model system? When I see FSG trying to do it for Liverpool, I don't see any reason why Arsenal can't do something similar. It's not something I'd rule out, not at all. I could definitely see it happening. It's just there's not a sign yet that those cogs are, at least in the public sense, turning right now. I'm Will says, I was checking the fixtures difficulty between City and us so far, and I thought ours were way easier. Do you think 4 points of a gap is enough? Given everything, I mean, we've gone to Anfield, we've gone to St James's Park, we've played City at home already. We've now gone to the Stadium Light, which appears to be a tough ground to go to, it seems, of course, as well. Burnley has proven to be a decent side as well. We've already now gone to Turf Moor. We're about to check off Stamford Bridge. We're about to check off Everton Stadium as well. So we've not yet played. I think about the teams that we haven't played in the league yet so far. Looking at the table, we haven't played Wolves yet. I don't think we've played. Have we played West Ham? I feel like, yes, we have played West Ham. And we've still got to play Brentford. We've still got to play Brighton. We've still got to play Everton. We've still got to play Wolves. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 teams from the bottom half we've still got to play. We've played City, we've played Sunderland, we've played Man United, Liverpool, Palace. So it's about even, isn't it? We've got some difficult sides still to come. Spurs and Chelsea, 3rd and 5th, get through those games. And I think, Arsenal are looking very strong indeed. Villa are going to be a tough team as well, definitely. And he says, Tom, what has been the maximum losses in a season and a team won the Premier League? Also, Michelle is targeting points, not games. How many do you think that we need? Mikel. I think that Arsenal don't need 90 points. I don't think it'll be a 90-point needed season to win the title. So I'd go 87. In terms of your question about how many losses did the most were there for the team, that I don't actually know. I don't know which team it was lost the most games and still won the league. Man City lost 6 in the 2021 season. Liverpool, no, 2018-19. Man City lost 4. 2017-18. City lost 2. So I think 6 might be the highest. I feel like there was a 7 at one point. Leicester only lost 3 games when they won the title. Someone will know better than me, but I don't know a season where there's been more than 6 defeats for a single team in a single season and still won the league. So let me know if you know the answer to that question, because maybe you will know better than me if there's been more. So yeah, we'll see if anyone can answer that question. Philly says, I'd have took this start to the season if I'm honest. It's just a shame about the Liverpool game. We didn't turn up and got done by a wonder of a free kick. I think we turned up more than people think in that game. I think we turned up pretty well in the first half. We were by far the better team in the first half against Liverpool. It was the issues at half-time. Arteta didn't change things in the second half proactively enough. He needed to make changes. He needed to build on what we'd done in the first half, but he didn't. And we were too passive in the second half, and that allowed Liverpool to grow into the game, to get more of a foothold. And while they did score an out of this world free kick, they were the better team in the second half, and it probably should have been a draw. But that free kick ended up being the difference between the two games. As Arne Slot put it correctly, I think afterwards, you play that game 10 times, 8 times, it's a draw, 1 time Arsenal win, 1 time Liverpool win, and this time it happened to be the Liverpool one. Abdul Hakim says the Arsenal winner playing Bayern today. Hope for a win. Let's go, girls. Absolutely. Let's hope they can get a right result. Oh, Lavezzi, chat. That is like a proper old school reference in terms of kind of Napoli players from the past. Lavezzi was definitely one of those that I remember playing on FIFA back in the day, Lavezzi. But he signed from San Lorenzo back in 2007. So before Micheli's time. But again, signing from Argentina, I think, and then eventually being sold to PSG in 2012 when there was kind of that big push from PSG to be the best team in the world. And it took all the way until, 2024? 25 before they actually won the Champions League. All those years later, finally done it. Yeah, Lavezzi, brilliant player. What pace and speed he had. At least I assume he did from the FIFA cardio. Arteta's formula for big games speaks for itself. I think it's incredibly results-based to say that you do any different after the fact that you've, done what you've done. I mean, Liverpool was the first defeat to a Big Six team since April 2023. That's just how good Arsenal's record has been under Arteta against the big teams. And you're right, Tipsy, if something's not broke, why fix it? Right, that's the end of part 2 and today's show. I'm going to be hopping on with Deluded Gooner at 9 o'clock, so I'm looking forward to that. So make sure you head over to DG's channel where we're going to have a conversation. It was meant to be yesterday, but I got so caught up in work that ultimately it didn't happen. So apologies to DG for that, but I'm making good on that promise and hopping on this morning. So 9 o'clock this morning should be with the man, the myth, the legend that is Deluded Gooner. So make sure you check us out on there. Have an absolutely fantastic Wednesday, people. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.